The NFL upheld the 3-game suspension of Houston Texans linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair. Ramon Foster, one of the hearing officers jointly appointed by the NFL and NFLPA, announced the decision Wednesday, one day after the punishment was handed down for repeated violations of player safety rules following Al-Shaair's hit to the head of Jacksonville Jaguars quarterback Trevor Lawrence on Sunday. Al-Shaair's hit was made while Lawrence was sliding to the ground, causing the Jaguars star to sustain a concussion. Lawrence was put on injured reserve Wednesday, probably ending his season. Al-Shaair took to social media after Wednesday's ruling, writing, "If you want me to be your villain, I'll be your villain. See you soon." When Al-Shaair's suspension was announced Tuesday, John Runyon, the NFL's Vice President of Policy and Rules Administration, wrote in his letter to Al-Shaair that the league deemed the hit unacceptable, and that his continued disregard for rules governing player safety will not be tolerated. Runyon added in his letter that Al-Shaair proceeded to engage in a brawl, which you escalated when you pulled an opponent down to the ground by his face mask, and also added that after being ejected, the 6-year veteran removed your helmet and re-engaged with your opponent while walking down and across the field, which started another physical confrontation near the end zone. Al-Shaair will be eligible to return for Houston's regular season finale against the Tennessee Titans. Al-Shaair has a base salary of $1.5 million this season, meaning it will cost him about $265,000. The NFL and the NFL Players Association have agreed to several important changes to the league's drug policies that will go into effect this week. The NFLPA sent a memo Wednesday to player agents announcing and explaining the changes. ESPN obtained a copy of the memo, which says the new policies will go into effect Friday. The new policies include changes to testing procedures, fines and other discipline associated with violations of both the performance-enhancing drug policy and the policy on substances of abuse. The level of THC required to trigger a positive cannabis test has been increased from 150 nanograms per milliliter to 350. Also, teams will no longer be informed of the specific substance of abuse for which a player tested positive, only of the positive result and the resulting discipline. Fines for violations of the policy on substances of abuse have been reduced. Under the previous policy, a first positive test resulted in a fine of 1/2 of the player's game check, a second in 1 game check, a third in 2 game checks and a fourth in 3 game checks. Now, a first positive test incurs a fine of $15,000, a second a fine of $20,000, a third a fine of 1 game check and a fourth a fine of 2 game checks. Players were not tested for fentanyl under the previous policy but now will be, if clinically indicated. There will be no discipline for a positive fentanyl test, but a player will be fined $15,000 if he refuses to attend a mandatory meeting about fentanyl resulting from a positive test. Fines for missed tests also have been reduced, and the procedure by which the league and the NFLPA determined the reason for a missed test has been altered to allow for greater leeway. Under the previous policy, missed tests were cumulative and could result in escalating discipline throughout a player's career. Under the new policy, a player's missed test count will reset to 0 once he goes 365 days without a missed test. For the performance-enhancing drug policy, there have been several changes involving testing procedures and reinstatement. Under the previous policy, a player suspended for a performance-enhancing drug violation could not be reinstated until he tested negative for the substance in question. Now, the player could be reinstated if it's determined the presence of the substance provides no performance-enhancing effect.